judges people are. Okay, moving on. So first you have a flow judge. And first you have a flow judge. And luckily for you guys, like let me tell you how lucky this is. I'm sure some of the TAs can tell you over the chat as well that having a flow judge is pretty rare and very exciting. And then getting a ton of flow judges your first tournament is pretty like awesome. So you guys are getting a ton of flow judges because a ton of TAs are being shoved into your rounds. So congrats, you have great first tournament material there. So flow judges essentially will like use a flow and they will generally prioritize technical choices over perceptual dominance. So it's not necessarily how you speak or stuff like that. It's literally about like how you argue and the like nitty gritty of what you're saying. So this idea of like tech over truth. So this means that they want you to be like collapsing on arguments and weighing things and creating impact calculus. So that brings us to like adapting to a flow judge. You guys don't really have to do this at this tournament, but it's just information if you're going to continue debating in high school or even college and that's something that you're passionate about. First is generally you can be faster than normal. You know, if you're going to speak quickly, this is the time to do so. Second is they're open to like non-stock arguments, or like I call like stock arguments like canned arguments, so like not canned arguments, which means they like want you to be a little more unique and they want you to have a bit of fun with your arguments. They want you to signpost and weigh. Everyone wants you to signpost and weigh. Please signpost your arguments, which means to like be like contention 1, like subpoint A, like create markers on what you're saying. And lastly, they want you to have they will really count drops. So dropped arguments won't be like, oh, like they didn't debate that, I don't care about it. It'll be like, oh, you like have no response to that, which means that you are conceding that you lost that argument, and that's how they'll perceive it. And lastly, they want summary and final focus consistency. So they want you to have like a consistent train of thought and like argumentation with your partner. Yeah, they are probably going to try to be like a judge that they wanted when they debated as well, and that's something to consider. Like I'm sure I and like a lot of other people here, they judge the way they wish judges would have judged them, and they want to give you good advice and they want to give you a way to like improve on in the future. And that's something I definitely keep in mind when I'm judging. That being said, I can be a bit of a harsh judge, and like I am a flow judge, so I will like just kind of reveal that. And I will like, I do have like high expectations, and I think that you will find that with a lot of flow judges. Like we generally know where arguments are going to go to, where they will boil down to, because a lot of debates end up being pretty similar. So we have that type of like, we generally know where your arguments are going to go, so we want to see you execute them well, right? Like there's not as much explaining that needs to be done. So then we go to a lay judge. So lay judge is essentially a judge that has no experience with debate, as you can see here. So what's essentially they're going to vote for is the team that speaks better and the team that like has a perceptual sign of dominance. So this means that you want to like look good. It doesn't necessarily mean your content has to be good, but your context, like how you present yourself does. So they want you to have like ethos in your argument. They want you to have some sort of strength show and dominance in crossfire, and they want you to stress the big picture. They want you to make the debate easy for them to understand, because they probably don't know where your like trains of thoughts are going or anything like that, because they haven't debated hundreds of rounds, right? So then adapting with your judge is you want to be clear with your argumentation and focus on your warrants. So like really make sure like you're explaining like where you got your resources from and like what they mean. Really explain the arguments that you're winning. Even if you feel like you're over explaining it, just explain it to like a great deal of depth. Stick to coherent logic. Make sure that like it makes sense, so it's hard to refute. Don't make it super complicated. Just be like, the economy goes down and this is bad because, right? Like really straight to the point. And lastly, make sure you have some control over your opponents in crossfire. This means like guiding your opponents to answers that you want in crossfire, where they stumble themselves, is probably the best way to go in front of lay judges. And lastly, have fun. Like lay judges are generally really nice to you. They're really sweet. Generally, they're parents, so they want to be nice to you. So, you know, just have fun and be relaxed, I think is like probably a key to debating in front of lay judges. Lastly,
just a note about the idea of perceptual dominance. this is not necessarily you being aggressive in round, but it's like, don't be aggressive, but maybe like sound the most scholarly, be like the most put together, like be super confident. That's what's going to draw a judge to think that you are dominant within the round. If you're like yelling at each other and stuff, they're going to be like, I don't know what I just walked into, but I want to leave. Yeah, you don't want a judge to be thinking that in the round.
If you're like a singer, wow, that's like a pretty niche thing. But if you're like a singer, or if you're like a sports player, right? And like if you're a vocalist, you know, like having control over your voice shows like a lot of skill, right? It's not necessarily that you're super loud or anything, but that you like know how to manipulate things, right? Like if you play soccer, like having really great controlled footwork is more impressive and shows that you have like great like control over the sport. So with like lay judges, you want to show that you have control over the debate and you know how you're manipulating things and how like you know what you're doing and you know it in a way that allows you to remain calm and collected. Okay, next, lay judges. Okay, so this is a people who are a mix of flow and lay. So that means that like generally these are parents who have had like one or two kids debate, so they kind of know how debate works because they like hear about it from their kids, or like kids are really into debate, so the parents judge a lot of tournaments, so they have to like learn how to flow. My dad has learned how to flow. He doesn't do it like the exact way everyone else does it, but people seem to like his judging and say he's like between flow and lay judging. So it's essentially like this kind of in-between judge where they do know what's happening and they understand your arguments, but they still like haven't done debate and they're not as detail oriented necessarily. So they tend to vote for the team that they feel wins the flow. So this means that you should debate on the flow. So like whatever you're putting down on the flow is what you should be like thinking about and debating with, but you should also be heavily considering presentation. And this means that they may not be the best as like techie arguments. So you guys don't know a ton of them, but when you do, play judges like maybe lay off techie arguments. Like don't go like straight into like these big overarching like broad philosophical arguments and stay with like stuff that's easier to understand. Like for them, they don't like buy technical arguments necessarily because they don't have experience with running them, and technical arguments don't tend to make a ton of sense until you've like learned them. So for them, it's not something that they've operated with a lot generally. Okay, so the last type of judge we're going to talk about is non-native speaking judges, who are people who English isn't their first language, but they're parents, so they're judging. This is pretty common, especially in Southern California, especially in events like Public Forum, I believe, and also I know Parley gets some of them as well. And this means that a lot of it is very similar to like lay judges, but make sure you're speaking like slowly and you have like really clean methods of delivery, and read their body language, right? If they're leaning forward, if they're nodding and they're like look like they're agreeing with you, then they like the argument, right? If they're like disengaging with your argument, it's probably not the one that they enjoy. So I think especially with like non-native speaking judges, it's probably the most important to read their body language and to like try to form like that type of connection with them, even though like it may be awkward for you because you're not speaking at the speed that you're used to speaking, or you're not getting into the depth of argument that you want to speak. You want to make sure your judge is happy and your judge understands what's going on. Does anyone have anything else to add to this section?
Okay. I guess just in general, remember, your judge is God in the room. What your judge says goes. You do not question them. Unless, like, of course, there's some scenarios where if they're being inappropriate, report it to tab. But in terms of argumentation, everything else, listen to the judge. A happy judge is a good judge. I can't stress that enough.
Fighting with your judge is a no-go. Don't fight with your judge. Just, like, treat them, like, with respect. Like, you can... Like, obviously, there will be judges you don't like and stuff like that, but treat all your judges with respect. Treat your judges like you would treat, like, a teacher or, like, a professor or something like that, because they generally have, like, they have what you want, right? They're the people who can grant you a win. Like, your teachers are the people that can give you a good grade. So, like, do what you got to do, you know? Okay. So, essentially, the bottom line is that you should just be consistent and you should create your own style and rely on stuff that you know you can deliver on, and make that style as appealing as possible to all the judges. And like note that like switching up your style like massively or drastically for each round probably won't work because it won't feel unique to you. Like becoming an entirely different debater based off the judge is really hard and likely not the easiest thing to do. So what instead is better to do is to find a way that you debate that's like pretty unique to you. I don't know a single debater that debates the same way. And essentially just like modify it slightly based off the judge. You know what I mean? Like there are judges that I have that are past policy debaters, and I go a lot faster than I would with people who like even have debated parley for a long time, because I know that's where they feel comfortable and that's what they want me to do. So, but that being said, I'm not like suddenly like debating for completely different policies or like advocating for like crazy things that I would never do in real life or like in like my real life debating world anyways. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. Like tailor your arguments, but make sure you are, it's still something you can defend, I guess. Anyone have anything else to add to that?
Just what Zara said on like not arguing with your judge. It's really, really important because you know a lot of judges that are nice will they'll not only just give you feedback after the round, but they'll also tell you who won and why they think they won. Like you obviously have to get lucky and get a good judge for this to happen, but it does happen. And a lot of the times you're gonna feel like it was the wrong decision. In fact, I felt like more than 70% of the time, right, it was the wrong decision. I should have won that round. But you know, it's like even though that happens, you shouldn't argue with your judge because first of all, arguing wouldn't get you anywhere because even if the judge could change their decision, it's a really long process to go through that because then they have to go to tab and be like, you know, which they're not gonna do like ever. That I can guarantee you. Right? No judge is ever gonna change their decision. They'll just get like more mad at you, which is worse because chances are you'll probably get that judge later, you know, like again. And if you get onto the wrong side of your judge, then right, because like Zara always says, a happy judge is a good judge. So you always want to stay on the good side of your judges.
Yeah. And part of the reason we emphasize that is that you will likely see judges repeatedly. Like, there's another judge on circuit for parley in high school, and her name's Mira, like me, but it's not me, someone else. She calls herself the better Mira, which is fine. But yeah, I've gotten judged by her when I was in high school, probably like 4 or 5 times at like big tournaments. And so like you will see like a rotating circuit of people that you will continue to see. And these people are people that you will still see even if you like graduate and you still do debate. Like I see people that judge me in high school, except for now I'm like competing against them, or now they're coaching my friends, you know what I mean? So it's a pretty small community. So you don't want to like label yourself as like that one mean person that like argued with someone and made them feel really bad about themselves and was super rude, right? So always be polite, even if you don't agree with them. Like if you disagree with the judge's decision, frame it as you wanting critiques and you wanting to get better. Don't frame it as like, I think I should have won, or like, I think I was better. If that makes sense. Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about is judge books. I personally don't use these, but I know some people do. Essentially what they are is it's like an archive of judges. Sorry, give me a second. My brother's here.
Okay, I'll take over for now. But judge books are when you have put together a list of judges that you know and you write out things that they like and don't like stylistically. So maybe this judge prefers it if you talk a little bit more about the link in an argument, or another judge might prefer it if you talk slower and really enunciate, or they want you to order your speeches in a certain way or sit in a certain way. So you can create these archives so that you, like, if you get a judge and you need to find out information about them, or like a teammate is getting them as a judge and they want to know something about them, they can just search for this judge, and then they can be like, okay, these are my do's and don'ts, so I know how to make judge like happy. You're gonna when you put together a judge book, you want to be detailed. because if they're really vague, then they're useless. And then also you want to give advice without being malicious. So like, yeah, some judges are really frustrating because they have wonky paradigms and like wonky judge preferences, but don't phrase it in a negative way on your judge book, because sometimes they can, like, judge books can get leaked, which would be a very unfortunate scenario for you. Um, so if you phrase it as giving advice, so like, say one judge really hates it um, if you stand up in a round while you're speaking. I don't think any judge has ever done this before, but say it's like that. Don't bash them for it, but instead in your book you would write, sit down while you're speaking, the judge prefers it. And so that kind of advice would then inform future generations of debaters, okay, this is what I should do in round. I should sit down, don't stand up. This is what the judge likes, so I'm going to do what the judge likes. Are there any questions about judge adaptation? Any questions about judges in general? Okay, let me see if I can share my, okay. I'm gonna now share my screen and we're gonna talk about prepping. After this lecture, you will get a break. If I feel like this lecture is going too long, I might give you a break in the middle. And is someone recording this lecture?
I am.
Awesome. So we can go ahead and get started.